Hey guys, Thomas Asula Jr. here, aka Mustache Tom, here to review the movie Jigsaw. So, I suppose I'll go over my quick thoughts on the previous Saw movies, since this is the continuation of the Saw franchise, which is now, I believe, at the eighth one. I believe this is the eighth one, according to the other reviews I've seen, anyways. Um, So, my thoughts are that the first three were solid enough. The first one was probably the most solid, obviously. Um, and after that, it kind of went downhill from me. And some of the cutting and editing got worse along the way, and the writing has never really been solid, except for the first one. And well, it kind of kept going again up until that third one, and everything else again just sort of went downhill. The whole aspect of there being multiple apprentices kind of uh, really messed with the series, at least for me. Especially when you have a killer that looks exactly like the cop that is giving chase. That just makes things confusing. Um, and not in a good way, because there's just like, I don't really know which one's the cop anymore and which one's the killer anymore. Oh, God. So, I, when I came to looking into Jigsaw, um, my expectations weren't actually really that high. Um, so keep that in mind as I go into this review. And if you do like this review, please feel free to go into the link in the description to the Patreon and give a little donation. So, with that being out of the way, it starts with this guy, Edgar, running from the cops. He's like running into this warehouse and he goes up to the roof. Uh, and the killer, I'll just say now, knew that the location of where the guy was going to run. We don't know if he was ever indicated to us as the audience if he was told to go there, because we don't hear. I don't think we hear his little tape. At least I don't remember a tape. But he holds this device. He claims that five people would be put in a new game now. Um, and he presses a button, and then it cuts back to this room where we see five people chained up. And the movie tries to indicate that this is the game that's going on currently, but based off of the ending of the movie, I'm going to take a wild guess and say this is supposed to be a flashback to 10 years ago. Um, and that's the biggest problem, is that they, since there's sort of this recopy of the Saw killer, this whole timeline thing gets really, really confusing, and that's the part that actually gets confusing. It's which part is the timeline, which part is the 10 years ago, um, is the game going on now the one that the guy, pressed the button for? Is that for another game that's going on now, supposedly, and will be continued in a Jigsaw 2 if this movie does well enough? I don't know. I mean, it's really confusing right off the bat. Um, so, the five victims in the past Jigsaw uh, case are squirming about. They're in these little they have the buckets on their heads, and they're being pulled toward this like chain like system with buzz saws, and they have to cut themselves a little bit in order to for them to escape. They are able to do so, and apparently one of them died, but not really, because he was the guy that Saw actually pulled in to say, you made a mistake. It wasn't really on you. I'm gonna give you a chance to be the new uh, setup killer guy. Uh, so, Buckethead. That's what they refer to him as. So, anyways, we cut to this hospital where we see um, Edgar's body being processed, and the lady in the game with the black hair. I I'm sorry. I did not remember some of the characters' names in this. I just called her in my notes for now the lady in the black hair. I believe way later in the movie they mentioned her name and I wrote it down, but that's the only indication I know. But she's like the one that apparently knows that this is a game. She knows the rules. She knows how to um, maneuver around and stuff like that in order for them to proceed. We have this black guy named Mitch. We have this blonde girl named Cartley or something along those lines. Um, and we cut to, I believe, present day where we see this hanging person on the bridge, and from there we see Howard, this white cop, come in, um, and he ends up being like this corrupt cop or whatever. Um, so they go to the morgue and they cut up the jigsaw piece and from the bucket head, and that's how they mentioned the whole thing about 10 years ago. They play this little chip that was inserted into the body, um, but another big plot hole is how did they even get the body out? They never show this, by the way, mind you. How did they get the body out? Um, yeah, so this movie does have some obvious plot holes. Like, again, how did that body even get out? Uh, so anyways, they get out of the first initial room, but they're still attached to the chains. The buckets are off, but the chains are still there. So they continue to get pulled. And Mitch, while they're being pulled in one direction, he grabs the tape from the classic Jigsaw thing on the bicycle. We've seen that in a few movies here and there. So that just grabbing the tape set them free, which is a little bit odd, considering that that's usually not how it works. But anyways, the set of needles comes down, and they all have these numbers, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they play one of the tapes as they're being sort of hoisted up into the air to be like choked out. In my notes, I wrote the big guy. He was like sort of screaming at everyone during this. He is trying to get her to say what the truth is, because apparently the truth will set them all free. But the blonde girl's like, oh, I don't know. And then she starts admitting it, but the big guy injects all of the needles into her regardless. So she ends up dying, because, yeah. So we learn more about who Buckethead really is. His real name, Malcolm Neal, I believe the name is. That's what I wrote in my notes anyway. They say that the voice is a match to John Kramer, the voice in the little tape recording. Which I'm kind of shocked that in the present day that they would even go oh, could that be John Kramer? You're already cutting out the possibility that someone could have edited that, or, we have really good technology these days. I mean, I assume Jigsaw takes place in present day now at this point in time, but I don't know, I could be wrong. Anyways, they get this other tape, or there's another tape set up, and the big guy that I mentioned ends up getting stuck in some device. I don't even know how he got stuck. I guess he went into a certain position in the room, and that's what set it off. So again, just really specific indications of how the game even continues is a little bit weird. So in the autopsy room, there's this red-haired girl. And she's doing the body autopsy on one of the bodies. I believe it's the next one at this point, but I could be wrong. There's this black cop that's talking with the white cop, and they're starting to go, "Hey, the girl there could be the killer, as well as the other guy that's with them. The guy and I believe the one they initially brought in, who, by the way, spoiler alert, ends up actually being the killer anyway. Um, so I wrote Mitch goes. I believe Mitch is the killer guy. He brings like the girl into another room, and then he like leaves or whatever. So, anyways, we learned that the big guy's name is Ryan, because my notes finally indicated that to me, and I should have wrote that earlier. But then again, when they had buckets on their head, I really couldn't understand what they were saying that well. So the Mitch and the other the black-haired girl get in this other separate room, and then that room ends up filling up with water. So this trap solely depends on them not only having Ryan getting stuck, but those two also getting into this trapped room, which kind of, I guess, lit up. So it's like, it's almost like video game logic, like, hey, head toward this obvious light source, it's gonna be a good time. So I wrote, the white cop is Logan, question mark, because I heard that name, and I thought that was referring to the white cop, so that's what I have there. Anyway, Eleanor is the red hair girl, and she's like, yeah, it matches John Kramer's blood. They continue on that notion, even though it's weird. So anyways, Ryan pulls this lever and it cuts off his leg, and he's like suffering. So Eleanor is talking with Logan. Logan was the cop guy? I don't know. I should make my notes a little bit more clear for myself. But anyway, they move. I believe no Logan. Wait, my notes make it seem like Logan is the killer. Maybe now. Yeah, I think it was Logan, and I got mixed up with another character. My bad. That's on me. Anyways, so Logan is brought into the studio, and she shows that she is an avid collector of traps, and somehow these traps are easy to access and build or whatever. They did whatever. Logic, whatever. Anyways, you would assume that the cops would, take in stuff like that immediately. And the black cop, mind you, is now there taking pictures, so he should have went in and arrested both of them on the spot right then and there, because the guy that was responsible was in there. So anyways, the black-haired girl is trying to help out, what's his face, the big guy. I'm already getting whatever. Anyway. And then the next tape, which again is based off of location, and it's set up for Mitch, and it like pulls this wire, grabs him by the leg, pulls him up above this like circular thing that's like spinning as he's lowering down into this like motorcycle thing. And if he goes too low without pulling the handle, then he'll die. He gets like the notification that he killed John Kramer's nephew, who is a completely new character that was never mentioned ever before, except until now. We never even knew that John Kramer had other relatives. So there's that. Anyways, the black-haired girl's trying to jump up and trying to help him, but and she like stops the device temporarily, but then it starts up again and then kills Mitch. And it seemed like a lot of the the people who died so far, it seemed like their crimes weren't even that grand or anything. Like the first guy mentioned like, oh, you snatched away a purse, but then I guess like it like added on when he was gone. It was like, oh, but you killed that lady, but like how could he have possibly have known that? I mean, again, just I don't know. Like that initial thing was like okay, but then it was like, oh, I guess he could be a part of the game. Anyway, whatever. Um, and then we cut back to the white cop. Whatever. I'm just gonna refer to whatever I have in the notes here. He's like yelling at the doctor because one of the bodies is gone of Buckethead, the first initial guy, and like he's yelling at the, I believe he was yelling at another cop that was there, or maybe it was like a doctor. It was either a doctor or a cop, but he's like, "You had one job." I thought that was a pretty funny line. Um, anyways, uh, the body, because now they're starting to suspect now that John Kramer's alive, so now they're trying to also get the casket out. So, anyways, the two cops are moving in on it, or at least the black cop is, and then they like see that the body of Buckethead was inside the casket, and they're like, "Oh no, John Kramer's body is gone!" And people are now freaking out, thinking he's alive. And by the way, this doesn't really go anywhere, so there's that, on top of everything else. But now the main guy, or the main killer, is trying to position the white cop into him being the killer. He's like, oh, he's like talking to the black cop, like, hey, this guy is the killer. He's the one who shot Buckethead, and he's the one who did this, and he's the one who did that. And the black cop just starts believing him without any actual evidence. And the black cop's like, yeah, that makes sense. So anyways, oh, that's a nice note. I wrote way down near the end that the black girl's name is Heather. That's a nice note. I wish I had wrote that earlier. But again, I didn't hear her name until like near the end of the movie, so whatever. So she ends up getting like injected, and we see the classical pig thing, even though I don't think that was completely necessary. Um, and then we see John Kramer make his entrance, which is like the biggest indication that this movie had to have taken, or these events of the actual game itself had to take place 10 years ago. Because otherwise, what? Like, how? Because they never explain how John Kramer would be there. So John Kramer starts explaining how Ryan killed 3 people and how his neighbor, Heather, ended up killing her own baby, and how the gun, he like places a gun in the middle of the room. He says, oh, you have everything backwards. You either have to kill one another or whatever, kill yourself or whatever. And then he just leaves. And he says the game is simple, but the most effective games are simple. And he leaves. So Heather points the gun at the guy, Edgar, and she ends up trying to shoot him, and then she ends up shooting herself because I'm pretty sure I don't know how guns work, but I guess this one works backwards somehow. Even though it does show like Jigsaw like building it, and I don't know how you would construct something to shoot backwards like that, but whatever. I guess that's the most innovative trap of this game, as simple as it is. I've never heard something like that ever being done before, so whatever. There's a lot of that going on in this review. Anywho, so the killer and the red-haired girl are going toward the trap area at this point in time. So there's that, and then the cop guy is chasing both of them toward that location. So I don't know if, I assume that Edgar just lives on even though he got his leg cut off. I mean, I don't think it ever shows what happens to him afterwards, so I guess he lived, I guess he won the game? I guess, I don't know, like, maybe he, I don't know, anyway. So anyways, the white cop ends up getting injected as he's working his way inside, and we see the killer getting trapped too, I finally wrote at the end of the review that the killer's name is Dr. Nelson. So Dr. Nelson, who got John Kramer's information mixed up, is the killer of this movie. Dr. Nelson, uh, confesses to what he's done. Um, or no, it's like who's gonna confess who's gonna confess to what they've done first. So the white cop presses Dr. Nelson's button to do the laser thing, the laser trap. And then we see the guy like fall down, Dr. Nelson fall down after he like made him confess or whatever. So that happens, and then the cop think he like survived, and then the thing goes on him. He admits like as to what he's did, and the laser's getting closer and closer. It eventually shuts off, only to reveal that Dr. Nelson gets up after that, and we see the fake blood packets inside the device. The lasers, I guess, were fake lasers. I mean, I suppose that's possible, but whatever. Um, so Dr. Nelson proceeds to put the lasers back on. The the white cop, um, and then he's like, "Oh, you don't deserve to live because you pressed my button." Like that's like the whole game. That was like the whole game. Just like what button would he press? I assume that's my assumption. They didn't explain that one too well. So I guess in a way that sort of works and sort of doesn't work at the same time. Like I thought that was okay of an ending, even though I feel like the reveal's kind of dumb. The initial reveal, that is. I felt like the actual conclusion is like, oh, okay, so I guess that kind of makes sense. But then again, he kind of breaks the rules at the same time, so it kind of doesn't make sense at the same time. So I don't know. The ending's weird. I'll say that the ending's weird. It has like a moment where it could have worked, but then it's like, So then he proceeds before the white cop dies. He's like, oh, the girl, she'll be my alibi because she's the one who's so obsessed with Saw, and she was still alive at that point in time. And then she sees like a vehicle coming toward her, and then she's like, ah, and I don't know what happens next, but whatever. Um, and then Dr. Nelson proceeds to close the door, saying some line that isn't game over, which is oddly bizarre considering that's usually the line you say as the Saw movie is ending. He said something else, but I didn't write down what he said. Um, he's like, oh no, I remember. He's like, I speak for the dead, which was kind of pointless for him to say because the white cop was already dead at that point. So, pointless dialogue was pointless, actually. He should have been saying game over at the end, like, as he had the cop with the straps on his laser head. That's how you would normally end a Saw movie, at least in my opinion. That's how they should have ended it, but no. He's like, I speak for the dead, and then but he's already dead! What's the point of that? I don't know. So, if you can't tell, I'm a little bit disappointed in this return of Jigsaw. I was expecting a little bit more here. There certainly are quite a few plot holes. The acting is mediocre. There isn't enough time for us to get to know these characters. A lot of it seems very brushed off, which is very off of where we originally saw it with Saw. I mean, Saw was so simple. It was just two guys in a room with a supposed dead body. And that was like the good majority of the movie. I mean, there was the whole detective aspect of the movie, but like the good chunk of the movie does go between these two characters, and we got to learn a lot about these two characters. And I think that's a big problem with Jigsaw, is that there are too many characters and there isn't enough time to get to know like who these characters are, besides these sort of generic, like, oh, they did this one thing, but we don't really, like, it happens so fast, like they die so fast, it's just like, oh well, that guy's dead, whatever. You don't really feel as bad as you would normally do, like in the earlier Saw movies. I feel like the weight of the kills, in other words, is pretty weak. So I would give this movie a 3 out of 10. I don't think it's a really great step in the continuation of the Saw franchise, and at this point in time, I feel like they're also trying to heavily imply that there will be a continuation beyond this point, and I don't feel like that's a great step for them to keep trying to continue on with this, especially when you have writing that's so baffling and there's so many plot holes in this movie and there have been in the past. I will say there's been improvement in the editing department, which is why I would give it the score. The editing isn't like choppy and going all over the place and doing that nonsense from the previous Saw movies. So I was a bit thankful for that aspect. But other than that, the only other points I would give it is like some of the stuff was like it made me think, but like the actual outcome was like, oh. So it did a good job of trying to I would say shift who the killer was up until the reveal. Then it's just like, oh, that's kind of stupid. That's actually really stupid. And they could have done a lot more. They could have went somewhere with the whole John Kramer thing's actually still alive somehow. I think they could have pulled that off actually if they really wanted to. Like the whole body. I don't know. I actually don't know how they would have pulled that off because we as the audience did see him die. So they would have to do a lot of explaining to explain that one. And I don't know how they would do that, but whatever. I don't think they'd be able to pull that out now, but we'll see. If I don't know if this movie will even make enough money, but we'll see. So that is my review of Jigsaw, and if you enjoyed it, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And once again, if you like this review, please head over to the link in the description to my Patreon, and please feel free to donate there as well. And until next time, everyone,